I recently got a patient of mine who is suffering from plantar fasciitis back to running. And I want to explain to you what I explained to him about how we know if it's the right time to get back to running. And when we add the running back in, how do we know if we should keep running? And how do we know how to progress the running once we get back to it after something like plantar fasciitis? So I'll spare you the details of his case, but something like a plantar fasciitis is tendinous, muscular in nature. It's not bone, okay? We're talking about the fascia, right? So things like plantar fasciitis and like tendinopathies like patellar tendinopathy or Achilles tendinopathy, these things warm up. So as you exercise, things actually tend to get better. They get worse after periods of rest. A classic example for plantar fasciitis is first thing in the morning, it's worse. If they're sitting for a long time and then they stand up, it's worse. Things for the patellar tendinitis is kind of similar, where if they're sitting for a long time, they stand up and it's kind of like, oh, my knee's kind of sore, but as they walk, it kind of goes away. So these kinds of issues, these kinds of problems are very responsive to movement and to exercise. So what we want to see in somebody who has one of these problems, let's talk about before they're back to running. We want to see their symptoms improve over the course of time. So their activity tolerance should improve over the course of their rehab. Their pain should be decreasing. They should be able to do more, okay? Once they get to a position where they're not really having pain throughout the day, it's very predictable what exercises can kind of flare up their symptoms. You know, maybe they're not able to do everything. Maybe they still have some pain, but they're definitely improving and they're definitely more functional than when they initially took their break from running. Because these issues warm up and because they respond well to movement, running can actually be something that is a net positive for somebody and something that actually helps them recover from their injury faster than resting from running, because the symptoms warm up and because the tendons and the ligaments and things of that nature, they like movement, they like blood flow. So running can actually be helpful. So for this guy with plantar fasciitis, I got him started on a very simple, let me say this. For the guy with plantar fasciitis, his symptoms were absolutely improving. He was feeling better over the course of time. And we were able to isolate a couple movements that were provocative and kind of stimulated the pain, but you kind of had to try. It wasn't very irritable. You kind of had to like poke it very specifically, not literally, but you had to load the tissue very specifically to incite the pain. So from my assessment, he was ready to start running. So we got him on a 2-minute run, 3-minute walk, run-walk ratio. So he was at the time doing more walking than running, which is also a pretty safe place to start whenever you're doing any sort of return to run. Make sure you're doing more walking than running. Okay. And what we saw with him was at the beginning of the run walk, he was maybe a little bit sensitive, but as he was running, his symptoms were improving. They were actually, his symptoms were decreasing, okay? His condition was improving with running. That's important, okay? After he did his initial run walks, his symptoms didn't get worse. As he did it over and over and over again over the course of a week or so, his symptoms continued, in general, his general symptoms continued to improve. They were not getting worse, even though we added running. And that is important. For somebody dealing with a tendinopathy or something like plantar fasciitis, if we add in running, we want to make sure that their symptoms continue to improve. If we add running and somebody's symptoms plateau, or even get worse, even temporarily, if we notice that adding in the running made symptoms get worse, or if it stopped the positive trajectory, if it stopped the improvement, it's too early to get back to running. We want getting back to running to feel good and to help what we're trying to rehab. If adding in the running makes symptoms worse, even for a short amount of time, it's probably too early to add in the running. So if you found yourself in a position where you're trying to add in the running and every time you do it, it's like, it kind of makes it worse. It kind of makes it worse. It kind of makes it worse. You can take a step back, reassess the situation, and see if maybe you actually need a little bit more rest from running, do some more rehab to build your base, and then once you add running back in, Start with a running to walk ratio that puts you at doing less running than walking, and build yourself up gradually over time. And what you want to see is, as you include the run and as you progress the run, you want to see your symptoms continue to improve. You don't want them to plateau, and you definitely don't want them to get worse. It should be an upwards trend, not something that ruins your progress.